Hi, I'm Yaakov Katz, and welcome to the Jewish People's Podcast by JPPI. On this week's episode, I'm joined by Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib, head of Realign for Palestine, a project of the Atlantic Council, where he serves as a resident senior fellow. Ahmed is a Gaza native. He's a political analyst who writes extensively on the Middle East, and he's become a leading voice trying to imagine what a real post-Hamas future for Gaza could look like. Ahmed's perspective is deeply personal. During this war, he lost more than 30 members of his extended family. His childhood home in Gaza was destroyed. And yet, rather than turn to anger or hate, Ahmed has chosen to hold on to a forward-looking vision. He's focused on the difficult question of how Palestinians and Israelis can maybe one day live side by side in peace and security. We dive into the biggest questions facing Israel, the Palestinians, and the region right now. How do we get to the phase 2 of the Trump plan for Gaza, the move from war to political reality? We discuss what new governance really means, what ending Hamas's rule could look like, and whether it's even achievable, how disarmament would work in practice, and whether the International Stabilization Force, the ISF, is even a viable solution or no more than just theory. We also confront the uncomfortable reality. Ahmed believes the current ceasefire is fragile and that fighting is likely to resume before a political framework is fully locked in. This is a candid, no-spin conversation about what comes next for Gaza and whether a genuine path forward still exists. Ahmed, it's great to have you on the podcast, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for speaking with me. It's a pleasure.
So, I've been, we've spoken a few times over the last, about year or so, and I've really been looking forward to this conversation because it's not often that I guess I, as an Israeli Jew, get to talk with somebody who is a Palestinian from the Gaza Strip, and that itself is always an opportunity. But I really want to start with right now, where we are on the ground with the situation. My feeling has long been, over the last couple weeks, that ever since the Trump 20-point plan rolled out and came, obviously there was the great success in the beginning, hostages released, main escalation, high-intensity fighting comes to an end, Israel pulls back to what's known as the yellow line, and in control still of about 50+% of Gaza, Hamas in control of roughly about 50% of Gaza. But ever since then, at least it seems to me, everything is stuck, right? We're not moving to reconstruction. We're not moving to the new governing entity. We're not moving to the ISF, the International Stabilization Force, this multinational force that's supposed to go in there and stabilize Gaza and stop Hamas. We're not seeing any of the disarmament. And also, we don't even know what disarmament means. Is it just taking light weapons? Is it taking the rockets? Is it taking care of the tunnels? How do you see where we are at this point? And when you look to the near future, forget about the long-term future for a moment, are you optimistic that we'll get there?
Well, that's a brilliant setup for those who've been tracking this. And yes, I will start by saying there's absolutely a stalemate, a stagnation that is very much so felt by the people of Gaza. Gaza now is characterized by multiple truths, the reality on the ground. So let's start at the micro, if you will. So you have a situation in Gaza where something like 70% of the population is displaced or homeless, and those are spread out between doubled and tripled up with other family members and homes. You have the tents. Some of them are getting flooded. Some of them are just in miserable conditions. You have people that have truly become destitute, out of money, out of options. This is simultaneous with the massive entry of aid and commercial goods. So there's two types of things going into Gaza. That's really important to distinguish. There's humanitarian aid, and that's the World Food Program, the UN, the Emiratis, the Qataris, the Saudis, the Egyptians are sending in these boxes, these food parcels full of the essentials that can sustain a family for some time. So that's aid trucks. And then there's commercial trucks. And that's a really important category to unpack because that's the merchants that were there before October 7th. Certainly during October 7th and throughout the war, we've seen a new merchant class, those who have benefited from the reselling of aid and kind of from the war economy, the black market. So now they're bringing in, some of them are bringing in basic staples to the supermarkets and whatever. Some of them are even bringing luxury items like iPhone Pro Max 17s and really lavish items that just are head scratchers. And let's say you're bringing in a truck that's worth 10,000 shekels. On top of that, you have to, there's no other option. You have to pay 50% taxation and protection money for Hamas. So that's basically going to cost you 15,000 shekels for this one truck. And so Hamas has been able to replenish its depleted coffers to pay and retain its current fighters. And so you see these markets popping up in Gaza with produce. You're seeing the entry of poultry for the first time, half of which turned out to be expired and gave people poisoning. You're seeing some people in Gaza being able to afford that. You're seeing really like two classes of Gazans, with a small class that is able to slowly re-engage in economic activity, and then I would say 2/3 of the population that is entirely impoverished and entirely destitute, and saying, where's the removal of rubble? Where's access to the aid? We hear about these hundreds of trucks, which are up to 800 or 900 trucks a day at times. So that's the micro. And then there's another angle to the micro, which is Hamas reasserting its full control over almost the entirety of the population of Gaza. And that's the areas in the so-called red zone, beyond the yellow zone. And one of the things that has been so sickening and so awful and so heartbreaking has been Hamas's straight up use of hospitals as their physical command and control centers, and
that's where they're based now, inside these hospitals.
Precisely that. And I actually have right now on a mission a bunch of Gazans going out. I'm trying to capture videos and footage, because what is so shocking, brother, is that you pull a young kid off the street in Gaza, in Khan Yunis, and you say, what's happening at the Nasser hospital at this section and at this section? Oh yeah, that's where they break people's legs, and then the expression is they stick platinum, platin, they call it, in your foot. So basically, you have Hamas's 3 notorious ministries right now. Those are the main ministries that are operating. Ministry of Interior, and that's the police, the torture, and the control over the population. The Ministry of the Economy, and that's the one that's running the racket of the taxation. You cannot operate as and there's no free market. Everything coming into Gaza has to get taxed. And then the Ministry of Finance, and that's facilitating the receipt of the cash and then the redistribution of cash throughout Gaza to centralized and individual nodes, so that then it gets reabsorbed into the payment systems. And so the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir el-Balah, and the Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. Right now, if Hamas doesn't like something you wrote on social media, they will call, or they will literally through a messenger send you a call up, like a warrant, and they'll say, come and visit us at this hospital. And so you're seeing mass terror applied across the Gaza Strip.
And this is the crackdown on the civilian population for what purpose? To prevent dissent, to prevent an uprising? Because one thing that you've also been calling out, and you shared some of these images on social media of the torture and the abuse of just regular Palestinians and regular Gazans. What does Hamas want to do? Are they afraid that there's an opportunity now, because they've been military weakened, because they have been economically weakened, that people of Gaza might just rise up against them?
Well, so I think my assessment is that we're past that. We're past. There's no the chamulas or the families in Gaza. They've been defanged, and they're not really able to mount a counteroffensive to Hamas. The 4 militias or so, with Abu Shabaab being the most prominent.
That's the one that Israel was supporting at some point during the war.
Precisely, and continues to, directly and indirectly. Those guys, they kind of have their own space, but they're not really crossing the yellow line, and they're very limited. There's nothing they can really do to substantively challenge Hamas. The families, the individual small arms that regular Gazans have, they're keeping those hidden. No one dares display anything that challenges Hamas's dominion. So I think Hamas is now done with the preventing a coup against its rule. I think what it is right now is the sustainment of its fear factor, of its rule, the sustainment of how are you going to get. Yesterday I spoke with, I'm speaking with a defector from Hamas right now, and I'm trying to get him, well, let's just say I'm doing a lot of things. But I was speaking with him, and he was like, I was like, well, why don't just some of these business people just stop paying the 50% taxes? Right. And he just laughed so hard. He was like, if you think you're a real man, stop paying. But because he said like the fear, it's the deterrence. So number one is deterrence. Number two, it's the sustainment of the governance. And number three is that their numbers relative to the rest of the population are minuscule. And so how are you going to get so few Hamas militants to control almost 2 million people? Is by sheer brutality and sheer terror. And that's what they're doing.
And
but
of course
that's... Just to finish the thought on this defector, he was telling me how, all of a sudden, these guys, these terrorists that were in tunnels, that were, shooting rockets and putting IEDs at the IDF military units and ground units and sniping array and doing all these, this quote-unquote resistance. All of a sudden right now, you'll be sitting in the street and suddenly there's like 100 Qassam, and they're visibly, they're wearing the insignia. There's like 100 Qassam guys out in the street. Whoa, what's going on? What's going on, guys? And then you just see a long trailer full of goods coming for a businessman just passing by, and then they're protecting it. So now they've literally gone from being a resistance force to being a protection gang, a literal mafia.
Like a mafia. The question, though, is Hamas, in addition to obviously doing this through sheer brutality, one of the things that we're hearing from Israeli intelligence sources is that pretty much they've replenished their ranks also. In other words, if, let's say, during the war over the last 2 years, Israel estimates that maybe 20,000 or so of the people killed in Gaza were Hamas fighters and affiliates of Hamas. Now, those numbers have pretty much gone back to what they were. So they're able to take young people off the streets, people who have no real hope at the moment, because, as you said, 2/3 of people in Gaza are living in these tents, are living on the streets, don't have really a future right now to look forward to. But then Hamas comes and says, listen, come with us, join our ranks, put on the mask, wear the green headband, put on the insignia, and you will have something to live for. You'll have money, you'll have food, you'll have maybe shelter. Is that the case? Is that what you're hearing also from people in Gaza, is that those numbers are back? It's easy for them to sway the hearts and minds of the young men?
So I've surveyed several people about the estimates of how much are Hamas guys getting paid per day, because a lot of these guys get paid per day, and the average that I've received is something like $25 to $30 a day that they get paid. And to your point about, and sometimes in addition to cash payments, there's also discounted or outright free, a food parcel here, a jug of water there, some clothes here, some indirect benefits that amidst the horror of the humanitarian situation, you're like, sure, I'll take that and bring it back to my family, or to myself, or whatever. And then you have the just being part of a broader gang, which allows you, strength in numbers, if you will. And that is really important. That is really key, because there was, for a period of time, this mass fear by a lot of these Hamas dudes who are like, ooh, like, now we're exposed. Like, the people of Gaza really do hate us. We're vulnerable to Israeli paid Palestinian informants and collaborators. The IDF can pick us off. Like, we're exposed. And so, for the existing and remnants of Hamas, they were just like, all right, I don't care how little the aid is, because I'm dead otherwise, so I'd rather take my chances with Hamas. And I'll go back to this defector that I connected with recently. And yesterday he was telling me, and I really pushed him, and I don't take everything he says for granted. And I've vetted this guy through multiple people. I've been doing this for a long time. So he was like, man, you have no earthly idea how Hamas really was this close to actually being truly, fully defeated right before the end of the war. To the point where they themselves, Hamas themselves, would admit to that in ways that they never have. And then the ceasefire came in, and I was like, oh. And now there's this massive injection of money and resources that he's saying is going to pump another year's worth of fighting and life into them. So, to your point, they are absolutely replenishing their ranks, and we've seen yesterday the report of one of the guys that surrendered in Rafah out of the tunnels, or near the tunnels area. And I haven't spent enough time to vet this particular story, but it is absolutely the case that Hamas is recruiting a bunch of teenagers and a bunch of like late teens, at most early 20s. And you can see it in their physique, you can see it in their like skinny physical appearances, you can see it in their eyes, you can see it in their skin. It's very visible that to me, that these are very extremely young people. I mean, almost akin to like child soldiers I haven't seen in the past in Gaza. And so what I will say to that is that most of these dudes are not combat effective. They are not trained. They don't have the ideological training or indoctrination that existed in some of the earlier, or the last generation, the October 7th generation Hamas fighters. That's not to minimize the potential harm and the potency of a desperate dude with an AK or a few hand grenades or an RPG. But nevertheless, I genuinely think that we ought to start thinking differently about the level of danger that these guys pose to the future of disarmament, the future of demobilization and reintegration, if that ever happens, but also the future of combat. Because I do think we're going to have to take some of these guys on. Some of these guys are part of a sinking ship, and they're never going to abandon it.
So you wrote last month, beginning of November, a piece in The Atlantic, War is Coming Back to Gaza, and basically kind of outlining how the peacekeeping force is not coming, how at the best bet in this piece, you talk about how we might get private contractors, but, even private contractors don't really have, as you write in this piece, don't have a good track record. Blackwater, Iraq, and other cases. I mean, this picture that you're painting here is one that's not positive at all. And with Hamas reasserting itself, taking over control, taking control of the aid, taking control of the governance of the western side of Gaza, of the red zone, let's call it, then, what is left besides for Israel to have to go back in there and renew and resume the high intensity war?
Well, I think this is where I hope that there's serious thought to clearing out the area. Clearing out the area beyond that Israel controls within the yellow the yellow line, from rubble, from tunnel shafts and openings, and doing basically what the IDF's been doing in Rafah all along kind of that thin corridor across Gaza and in the north. And this time, unlike the last 2 years, not having Smotrich or Ben Gvir say, we don't want to repopulate Gaza's north with civilians because we want to go and settle it, or we don't want Gaza, we want to concentrate them all in the south so that the Trump plan happens, or so that Egypt takes them. This time, understanding that Gazans are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. Mass, a voluntary migration. No one's willing to take Gazans in large numbers. There's bits and pieces here and there, but Israel has not been. So, the idea is to start from the beginning with the understanding that the population is here to stay.
So in this area controlled by Israel, clear out the rubble, clear out the tunnels, and start the reconstruction there, and try to move the Palestinians from the Hamas areas into that area and get them into those areas. Is that what you're talking about?
Phase 2 is not so much the reconstruction as much in the classical sense of the word, as much as I'm talking about creating something that's a step above tents, something that can sustain the population there without them being in the cold or the extreme heat. I'm talking about mobile homes. I'm talking about caravans. And I think we can get something that's part of an actual cohesive strategy that the Arabs and the international community will 100% pay for and support, because now it's getting down to brass and tacks. It's what's the goal of this war? You got the hostages out. What are you trying to actually accomplish? What are you trying to achieve? Stepping back from that, you look at Indonesia downsizing from 20,000 troops to 1,500 troops, and they're saying they're going to be all engineers and doctors and whatever. You look at Azerbaijan saying, well, we're going to actually only send them if the fighting stops. The UAE and the Saudis, and we talked to some of the same people. What I've been getting, and makes total sense, is that they're very upset with how Qatar was basically positioned as the spearheader, if you will, of, okay, fine, like you did phase 1 and got Hamas to release the hostages, but the concessions that we're giving to Qatar and the way that Qatar has set up Hamas and postured Hamas has been disastrous. Qatar all along has intended to recycle Hamas, to rebrand Hamas, to remarket Hamas as part of the solution, as part of the security apparatus. And I am very sad to say that I think some people, I'm not going to name names here because it's very easy to discern, within the Trump administration thought that maybe that can work out. And there is mistaken as those elements of the Israeli security apparatus before October 7th that thought Hamas is actually capable of moderating. Hamas can temporarily act rationally, but it's all in pursuit of a deeply irrational outcome, which is the destruction of Israel. Period. End of story. Hamas can never become the PLO 2.0. Okay. Yeah, otherwise, there's.
No, but I've been talking with some American officials who are involved in this, and I was talking with a couple of them, and I said, I see the situation. I don't fully understand how we get to disarmament, how we get to reconstruction on the side where Hamas is, right? You could create some puppet government, maybe. You could. So where is this going? So I'll tell you what I'm hearing, and maybe you're hearing the same. Let's get the ISF. Let's try to put that on the side where Israel is. Let's try to get the Palestinians to move into the side where Israel is. Now, I just have. So my question back was, I don't get this. 1 second. Will Palestinians move into an area that is controlled by the Israeli military? That's question 1. Question 2, what international force, you mentioned Indonesia, but who is going to send their peacekeepers, if let's call them that for a moment, into an area where you are under the muzzle of the Israeli military also. So I think there's a lot. My sense is that within the U.S. right now, there's a lot of wishful thinking, but it's not exactly thought out to the extent. And one thing that I heard from somebody, which kind of made my jaw drop for a moment, although maybe this is the best case scenario, we're buying time. Let's see what happens. Let's hope. Let's see if we can do it. But at the very best, we've bought some time. Things have de-escalated. Hostages went back. War ended. Maybe things will work out. And to me, it's like, it's not going to work out because, like you wrote in your Atlantic piece, war is going to come back eventually. It might not happen tomorrow, and it might not happen in 2 months, but it's going to happen at some point.
100%, brother. But here's the thing, though. I mean, this is where we go back to, I'm looking at the different chapters of the last 2 years and trying to learn from, like, sending people from northern Gaza, even in the last 2 months of the war, and saying, we're going to go into Gaza, we're going to take the fight to Hamas. But you sent them to Nusayrat and Deir el-Balah and Khan Yunis, where Hamas is in control. So what were you thinking? Pushing the remnants, like 1 million people, into the hands of the terrorist organization that controls the aid, that controls security, that can basically beat the hell out of anybody who dares open their mouth against it. So this is where I think there could be a middle of the road scenario where some of those humanitarian areas are run by NGOs or private companies or etc. beyond the yellow line. I think 100%, and mark my words, man, people don't care about, they're not going to sit here and be like, well, I'm not going to leave this crappy tent that just got over flooded with sewer water, literally, and where Hamas is roaming around somewhere. I have to, like, fight every day to stand in a long, dirty, disgusting line to use a public bathroom. I have to figure out a way to feed myself. My child is sick and I can't give him Tylenol. Or I can go over there and sit in an Israeli-controlled area where Hamas isn't going to be there. I'm going to have access to a caravan with a door that I can close, even if it's a wooden door. Access to basic necessities. But, oh, I'm not going to do it because Israel controls it? No, absolutely not. But even better, I think to bridge that gap initially is Israel kind of has overall dominion, but without the direct control, so that you reduce the tension, so that you don't have individual Israeli troops involved in administering.
So what the Palestinians would see would be this ISF force as opposed to an Israeli soldier. That's who they would see on that side.
But so you have that, or you can have private enterprise running it, and there's nothing wrong with I mean, and I'm not talking. I mean, who this private enterprise would be, what NGOs could be, you could set up. I mean, someone will immediately push back and say, oh my God, you're talking GHF 2.0. And right. You know what? I mean, if you can administer this in a way that ensures maximum civilian safety, that learns from the mistakes of the GHF, that institutes actual checks, because you don't just say, okay, people, just come on over here. No, you actually check people for weapons. You check their IDs. You check this. And you have tiers of, okay, well, someone's cousin is related to Hamas, but they're not. Okay, fine. It's a bunch of women and children. Like, you actually have a smart triage system rather than saying, okay, everybody just show up. Just show. Because guess what? Hamas showed up to the GHF sites as well, and was able to collect individual Hamas guys. They just wore regular civilian clothes and they just ran and marched in there. So that's one thing. But going back to the idea of, listen, I want to be clear. I don't want the war to start. I have grievances with the IDF. They killed my family after all, okay? But this is bigger than the IDF or myself. This is about the future of 2 million people in Gaza, and whether it's going to be balkanized with eastern and western Gaza, whether it's going to face the Somalia scenario whereby it's just going to be run by remnants of Hamas's warlords and it's going to be surviving on handouts. And as much as The analytical side of me will say this, even though emotionally I might have my own baggage, but I'll put that aside. It is absolutely clear that the only entity capable and willing of taking on the fight to Hamas is the IDF.
Yeah.
That is the fact. No Arab is going to do
But I
it.
mean,
Not
but
the
Ahmed,
Indonesian.
I just want to understand. I mean, in this situation as you see it, again, this is your vision for a moment. Let's say that works out. Let's say we can even get 500,000, 1 million people, right? Some big number. We're still dealing with a situation where Hamas is in control of half of Gaza, is in control of half of the people, and is rearmed, replenished its ranks, refilled its coffers. I mean, at some point, they're not just going to give it up, right?
So this can be done in tiers and in phases. And this is where I've called, like, I actually see the ISF being able to, I go into, like, when I called for private contractors, that was basically to be the tip of the spear, to be able to take on Hamas and bring the fight to Hamas in a way that doesn't put Indonesians, Azeris, Arabs, or Muslims in a situation where they have to fire at and kill other Palestinians,
Right.
even if they're Hamas. And I've asked multiple Muslims and Arabs, officials that is, and they were like, I can't sell that to I can't do it. Like, I can't get away. I can't make this happen. And I was like, okay, but we're talking about Hamas. We're talking about this. And they were like, and that included Arab officials who were adamantly against the Muslim Brotherhood. They were like, okay, the Muslim Brotherhood in our country, whatever. But here they have the label of being Palestinian, the Palestinian cause. No, our soldiers, they were like, my best...
No, they can't have an Arab soldier pick up a gun against a Palestinian,
even if it's Hamas, even if they're terrorists. Like, they said literally, like, our best special forces guys they won't do it. They won't do it.
What Ahmed? I mean, one of the authoritarist issues, at least for the Israelis here, has been the return of the Palestinian Authority, and any role that the Palestinian Authority, or any Palestinian for that matter, will play in the new design or reconstruction or rehabilitation of the Gaza Strip. Now, in Israel, to me, my long criticism has been this is mostly for political purposes. Netanyahu has been willing to do a lot to kind of move forward here, but there's one bridge he won't cross, and that is the really openly bringing the Palestinian Authority in a real way into Gaza, because he knows when the moment that happens, that's it. The government's over, and he just won't go that far. But at the end of the day, and I'm curious how you see this, there isn't someone else, right? I mean, it's not, who is going to rule Gaza, right? I mean, you need to have a Palestinian. It needs to look like a Palestinian, walk like a Palestinian, and be a Palestinian. Is that true, A? And B, if so, where does that come into play here?
Well, I struggle with this, but also this is another example of the idea of multiple truths. So multiple things are true at once. On the one hand, I mean, and I've oscillated back and forth. I mean, listen, I'm just like the next guy trying to figure out what to do in an ever-changing situation. I do believe that there are components of the Palestinian Authority that are very critical, as just administratively, financially, legally, and otherwise. It's like a lot of the legwork has already been done. Just kind of bringing that into Gaza is very helpful. Even just the list of medications that the Ministry of Health uses, the passport minting, the use of degrees, the degrees that Gazans and Palestinians get from Gaza and the West Bank, and how you link them from to the Arab system, blah, blah, blah. Like, a lot of these bureaucratic procedures that the PA has under its umbrella are key and critical to bring back to the Gaza Strip to accelerate the growth and the healing and the recovery and connectivity to the rest of the world. However, there is this very and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I don't care. I'm just going to say it. There's this very lazy European idea that if you just import the West Bank-based Palestinian Authority and you just put them in Gaza, that khalas, this is going to initiate the pathway to Palestinian statehood, and things are going to be, and we're going to have unity in Gaza and the West Bank, and we're going to have the two-state solution, and khalas, things are going to move forward, and sababa. And I just think that couldn't be further from the truth. I think, with all due respect to many of the good people in the Palestinian Authority, many of the professional players who care, this is a moribund, Soviet-styled, Ba'athist-fashioned regime that is so uncompelling, so incapable, so
ineffective,
right, and ineffective, and handed Gaza on a silver platter. Abu Mazen gave the order to pull out of Gaza in 2007. And I want a serious Palestinian to prove me wrong and challenge me on that. His own Tawfiq Abu Khusa, some of his own security heads said that he had this this reverse Uno card or whatever strategy of let Hamas, get stuck with, and he thought that Hamas is going to get stuck with governing Gaza for a couple of months and come back and beg and say, oh, please, come take. Hamas themselves didn't expect the collapse of the Palestinian Authority in 2007 as fast as it did. And this was after, Bush and Condoleezza Rice and all of them had this grand strategy using
the democratization, yes, the elections also in 2007.
Well, and even beyond the elections, they were pumping, millions of dollars into Gaza and the training of guys, only for them to turn around and sell these weapons to Hamas guys. And so I don't believe that bringing the Palestinian Authority is smart. I don't believe that the Palestinian Authority is going to reform in a way that somehow makes it this incredible, new, vibrant polity. I do, however, think that out of the ashes of Gaza, and people have a hard time thinking about this because for now it's we're stuck with Hamas, what do we do? I do actually believe that there could emerge a healthier alternative to the PA that can build upon the PA with the aforementioned bureaucratic and administrative and legal structures and financial structures that I started the answer with, but that actually creates a new generation of political, a new political life that has a new generation of Palestinian politicians who, because, if you think about it, Palestinian politicians have historically been Hamas, Fatah, PFLP. They've all been of these factions, right, these different groups. And that's where much of Palestinian political life has been defined by opposition to Israel. We can understand this historically, blah, 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 blah. But if we want to move away from, if we want to reclaim some sense of agency, if we want to create a compelling case for what does it mean to be Palestinian? What is the Palestinian national identity? How are we different from Jordanians? How are we different from other Arabs? Is it the food? Is it the politics? Is it the location? How are we going to exist in the 21st century? How are we going to not be aid dependent for the rest of eternity? I want a new generation of political life whereby parties are not defined by what's your resistance program to Israel. How are you going? You address the military occupation. You address the relationship with Israel. But you're also defined by how are we investing in the human capital of the Palestinian people, since we're so numerous numerically. So that's where I think Gaza could actually be an opportunity to start fresh. Not in the spirit of let's just experiment and but for the sake of this might be a once in a generation opening to actually have the rejuvenate, to not just have reconstruction, but to have a renaissance, to have a rejuvenation, to have as Tony Blair, when I met with Blair, he was talking about and he helped me kind of coin this word that he uses all the time now, but like the reconstitution of Gaza. And it's not just rebuilding streets, but like, I don't want to rebuild all the destroyed refugee camps. Like, I want to socially re-engineer Gaza, where 2/3 of the population aren't perpetual refugees in their own homeland.
And we have to hope for that, because the future of one of prosperity and stability goes hand in hand with the elimination ultimately of the terrorist and radical entities. The thought that you just fight, that's one piece of it, but you do need to have this march or this process that does lead to a better future. I want to ask you though, Ahmed, before I let you go, I have heard you speak about in the past of how over the last 2 years about 30 members of your family have been killed in this war, how homes, your own childhood home, destroyed and severely damaged, how family members, relatives of yours were able to go and retrieve photos or some memorabilia, remnants of what your childhood was. I mean, what can you tell us about your family right now? Where are they? Where are they located? What side of the line are they on? And what do you hear from them?
Well, so, the tragedy is that they got dispersed all over, and this is on my dad's side and on my mom's side, and both of these houses got wiped out. And there's my brother there. He runs field work for a major international medical NGO. There's what remains of my cousins and my family. I was able to get my mom out. My siblings are dispersed as well. I have a sister in Jerusalem and others in Europe. And I have an aunt who's in a tent, and others who survived the bombardment are dispersed in some apartments here and there. And my brother and I try to help those who are surviving. Some of them are apolitical. Some of them are strongly against what's going on. There are some who are angry at Israel, but also angry at Hamas. They're just like all over. They're mostly right now in either Khan Yunis, or a few have made it back to Gaza City to live near our destroyed family home. And there are other family members who are dispersed throughout the world as well. And that includes even a terrible cousin of mine who attacked me recently online because he apparently has adopted the Hamas pro-terror narratives. And I said openly and publicly that I don't care if you can be my own brother, you can be my own son, but I would absolutely have none of this in my life and in my realm. He's in Turkey, of course, and has been in Turkey for the past 9 or 10 years. But, I mean, go figure, right? And so, but that's to say that unfortunately, just like many other families, I mean, it was very common in Gaza to have family members, a family with like 2 people in Fatah. One is in Fatah, one is in the Palestinian Authority, and then one is in Hamas.
Yeah.
And sometimes people would mention that in the past, I remember, and they would mention it as a way of how, like, diverse our society is. And I look back at that, and I'm like, I do believe, as much as I think Hamas is an abomination, Hamas is not Gaza, Hamas is not the Palestinian people, I do believe in a sense of collective responsibility. And I look back and I wonder, what steps could we as a society have taken collectively, including those of us who are against Hamas, to actually prevent the normalization of what is inherently abnormal and horrendous and violent and evil, and to not think that violence that was directed at Israelis would one day actually be fully directed at the Palestinians in Gaza, and that Hamas would become this this Satan that is meant to destroy the Palestinian people, I worry if those families should have been like, actually, yeah, no, we're not gonna like sit here and be like, oh yeah, we have 2 PA and Fatah guys and 1 Hamas. It's like, actually, you Hamas guy, like, no, like you're out, like you're cut out, you're excommunicated. But going back to my family, I mean, this is where it's been really difficult to navigate this tragedy. On the one hand, I am just as emotional as everybody else about the sense of loss. I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm furious, I'm resentful. But what I'm not is hateful, because hate is the aforementioned feelings and emotions you can actually harness and use them to propel you forward in redirected ways. But hate, only vengeance and bitterness comes out of that. And that's not easy, to be clear. That is a daily challenge. I've chosen to honor their legacy by setting an example for breaking away from this vicious cycle of violence, revenge, rinse and repeat. And that's why I went out of my way to connect with Israeli survivors of October 7th, with hostage families. And this is not kumbaya. This is not easy. This is not, let's eat hummus and everything's going to be fine. This is hard work. It was
Israeli missiles that ultimately killed your family members, right? I mean, that's the harsh reality.
Precisely.
But, and that's the but that you live with, is that those 2 truths that you spoke about before, is this way to recognize that pain and that reality, but also Hamas, as you saying, being this abomination, and how can we together rebuild or reconstruct a new reality that can be, I guess, in the best way possible for both sides and both peoples.
Inshallah.
Well, Ahmed, I really want to thank you for joining me. Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib. It was really, it was inspiring, and it was important. So I want to thank you for taking out the time to talk to us.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode. As always, you can find us where podcasts can be found, on YouTube, on Apple, Spotify, and the website of Times of Israel. As always, we'll be back with another episode next week. In the meantime, share this with friends, family, and anyone else who you think might be interested. Give us a 5-star rating if you would be as generous to do that. And we look forward to hearing from you. You can always find me at my email, yakovkatz@gmail.com. That's one word. In the meantime, have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.